Hello, and welcome to my presentation on disability categories and the effects of disability categories on student performances. I will try to keep this to the 3 to 5 minute um, limit. I may go a little bit over. I will try not to talk about each of these categories in detail, but talk about overview, what we need to know about the Individuals with Disability Education Act disability categories, and how we need to think about this in terms of student performance. For this assignment, we were asked to include gifted and talented, which of course is not a disability category, but we were asked to include this for very good reasons. When we're thinking about inclusive classrooms, which this class focuses on, we are thinking about ways to engage with all of the students in our classrooms, the typical learners, the gifted and talented learners, and the students with special education needs who have individual education programs. In order to do that effectively as teachers, we have to think about the ways that these different categories affect them socially, academically, and in communication. And we have to think about ways to engage all of these students. For the gifted and talented students, we have to think about ways that they will not become so bored because they access information, they understand concepts so quickly that they just turn off and don't do their work anymore. I have known students like this who are so smart, so gifted, so talented that they actually are poor students because they are not challenged enough. So how do we challenge them? How do we challenge them academically? How do we work to incorporate them socially into the process of learning? And how do we help them learn to communicate with their peers? Because often they communicate at such a high level that they're frustrated that their peers are not following along. That stigma that comes from being gifted and talented can be very similar to the stigma that students with disabilities face as well. The other ones are all disability categories, and I included both learning disabilities as well as orthopedic impairment, which is a learning disability because the level of impairment can affect the student's ability to learn, which is why it's one of the IDEA disability acts. In this organization chart, as you see, I included a very short description of each of the disability categories. And then in the far right column, I address the academic, the social, and the communication needs of all of these students. Although their disabilities can differ as far as their ability to access communication, their ability to access written information or oral information, what ties them all together is the ways that they can keep students from accessing learning. Just like for gifted and talented students who become so frustrated that they're bored, students with learning disabilities can become frustrated because the teacher isn't opening the right doors to information and knowledge. So they need help, they need guidance, they need accommodations often to open those doors so that they can, for dyslexic students, for instance, access the reading and writing that they need to do. For autistic students to learn how to negotiate communication spaces where it's hard for them to read facial expressions and body language. For students with obsessive compulsive disorder to learn strategies to put those compulsive thoughts, they can't really put them aside, but to deal with them in the moment so that they can focus on their learning, so that they can focus on the task at hand in class. And for orthopedic impairment, how they can access classroom materials when their motor skills have been affected, when maybe they can't pick up a pencil or access the other learning tools in the classroom. And for students with orthopedic impairment, one of the biggest barriers is to physical education, as well as the more informal spaces of the playground and free time within schools. For educators, it is really important to think about each of these students and how their disabilities show up in the classroom so that we know we have to provide alternative ways to communicate. It is important if they have difficulty reading that we provide tools that will help them access the reading that students are required to do. If they have trouble maintaining information, to provide tools that will help them externalize some of that knowledge in a graphic organizer or some other way. I have included much more detail in my larger report, which you will read. Thank you very much for listening. I will see you again in my written language in our course shell. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.